Okay, welcome back. We are on Max chapter 25, and when we last left off, Justin, our main character in the story, had spent some time down at the cemetery, and things had worked out. Max was okay, we learned, and our main character really had come to terms with the death of his brother, and had a chance to explain that he was never going to be as great of a Marine as him, but he was okay with that, and that was just fine, just being who he was. And so we are moving on into chapter 25. When the chapter ended, it says, Justin raised his hand to his brow, offering his brother a quick salute, just like Kyle had taught him to do. And that brings us into chapter 25. Justin leaned his bike against the side of the house and headed into the backyard. He stopped short when he saw what was there, or more accurately, what wasn't there. Max's cage was gone. Justin grinned and opened the back door. He stepped into the kitchen and breathed in the scent of his mother's pot roast. It was the best smell on earth. Max sauntered in behind him and let out a happy yap. His tail wagged so hard he whacked Justin's mom with it a couple of times. She chuckled and gave Max a scratch on the back of his neck. Max wiggled over to Carmen and Chew, who both dropped to their knees and wrapped their arms around him. Max sniffed at the air. His tail wagged even harder. Yeah, Max, Carmen said, letting him lick her nose. We've got some carnitas cooking for you tonight. Pamela closed the stove and tossed an oven mitt onto the counter. She took 2 big steps over to Justin and wrapped her arms around him, squeezing him in a hug so tight it forced the breath out of him. Mom, he managed to squeak out, are you going to do this every time I come home now? His mom didn't release her grip. Yup, she said. Every time you're an hour late coming home from a walk, you bet you're behind, I will. She let him go and took a couple of quick breaths. Where on earth have you been, anyways? Out cleaning up Gotham, Chew said from across the room. Taking out villains, right, buddy? Well, Carmen said with a silly grin, you know he needs to be a superhero if he's going to be my boyfriend. Justin laughed, blushing a little at the word that was still so new to him. But there was no denying it. He liked the word, especially when Carmen was saying it. But there was still something Justin needed to get off his chest. His expression turned serious. He turned to Chew. He hadn't been sure how to phrase what he needed to tell his friend, but he was starting to figure out that it was more important to say something than to say it perfectly. Chew man, I'm glad you're here, Justin began, and I'm really sorry. I know your family must be upset about Emilio going to... Chew cut him off. Emilio belongs in jail, man. You did the right thing, and we all know that. That dude was bad news for my family, too. Justin was so relieved to hear that Chew felt that way. He and Chew shook hands. Justin's dad appeared in the doorway from the living room, still in his work uniform. Max ran over to him and sniffed at his legs. Ray patted Max lightly on the top of the head. Well, hello, everyone, he said with a wave. Hey, Mr. Wincott, Chew said, and Carmen said at once. Hi, honey, Justin's mom said. Hey, Dad, Justin said. Where's Max's cage? His dad shrugged and said, at the junkyard, on top of the pile, where it belongs. He'll be staying in the house with us from now on, where he belongs. Justin and his dad held each other's gaze, both of them unsure where to go from here. They'd been through a lot together this summer, and now they were in new territory. What do you say to your father? Justin's mom asked. It's about time, Justin said with a straight face. There was a beat of awkward silence, then everyone burst out laughing. That's cold, Chew said, pretend punching Justin on the shoulder. Max immediately began barking and raced over to Justin's side. He positioned himself between Chew and Justin, his ears back. It's okay, Max, Justin laughed. He's our friend. Take it easy. Max sniffed at Chew and wagged his tail again. Chew let out an exaggerated sigh of relief. Everyone started chatting again. Pamela, Chew, and Carmen picked up their conversation about the merits of various dog breeds while Pamela stirred a giant pot on the stovetop. Justin watched his friend, his girlfriend, and his mom together and felt an ache in his chest he'd never felt before. It was a new, funny combination of happiness, contentment, love, gratitude, and a big, healthy dose of sadness that his brother wasn't here to share all this with him and their parents. Justin felt his father's eyes on him. He looked up to where he still stood in the doorway. Justin wondered if his dad was thinking the same thing he was. They exchanged a long look, and Justin gave his dad a half a smile. Ray didn't quite smile back, but he nodded at Justin, and Justin saw something in his dad's expression that he'd never seen there before. Respect. Max gently pressed his nose into Justin's palm. Justin looked down at him. "You hungry, buddy?" he asked, squatting down so he and Max were eye to eye. Max pressed his snout against Justin's cheek and snuffled in his ear. Justin stroked Max's head. "That's my boy, Max," he said. "That's my boy." And that's the end of this book. On a little note, I did want to read this stuff to you because I feel like this is important information. It says dogs have been used in the U.S. military since World War I. More than 3,000 dogs served in Iraq and Afghanistan since 1993. More than 60 dogs and 40 of their handlers have been killed in the service of their country in those years, and this story was dedicated to the memory of them. So, thanks for joining us for this book, and we'll maybe see you again.